What's your fucking game, shithead?
Shithead? What's a shithead?
The sun is killing us. Help the ones that are still alive. Hold my hand. Promise me, Connor.
Anything.
Promise me you'll do something to stop this.
I will.
They'll remember this day for 1,000 years. The day we protected the planet from the sun.
CSC, this is Houston Space Control. Satellite is in final receiving position.
What now, gentlemen?
Isn't that your friend McCloud, General? He's getting older, but he's still alive.
There you are. I want you to leave for the future immediately. Find McCloud and kill him.
He's an old man now. He'll be dead in a couple of weeks.
I don't care. Find him for me. Kill him. Oh, no. Not again.
Rather glad the magic works.
Highlander 2 The Quickening arrived April of 1991 in the UK and the month of November that year in the USA, costing around $34 million to produce, and only crawled back the money to cover its budget and struggled to make any profit. It was slammed with very negative reviews at the time for its incoherent plot and sloppy editing. It made Siskel and Ebert's worst movies of 1991 list. The fans were even more furious with the changes made to the mythology of the first movie. Instead of being from the Highlands of Scotland, they came from another planet called Zeist. There were reports in the UK of cinema goers leaving the screenings before the film had even finished, down to the radical changes made. The first Highlander wasn't a huge hit in theatres. It failed in the USA down to 20th Century Fox failing to market the movie, but luckily in Europe it was given a strong support and gained a larger following, but its main success came in the form of VHS. In a short period of time it became a cult classic. The producers of the series, Bill Panzer and Peter Davis, would get so many requests from distributors asking them when a sequel was going to come out. They kept stressing Highlander was a one-off movie, and its story clearly ended with no options for a sequel, but the financiers replied, "You will think of something to bring them back." So this got Highlander 2 started, and its eventual downfall begun. With Russell Mulcahy returning and the lead stars from the first movie, the producers decided to move the production to Argentina in an attempt to save money. The currency was very weak at the time and the dollar was very strong, the film being financed under a rule of if they go over budget, the bonding company who are in control of the money will take full control of the final cut, very much like the situation that occurred on Blade Runner. That's probably why the choice of shooting in South America seemed ideal at the time, so they don't have to spend too much money and lose control of the picture. But things became apparent in Argentina very quickly. The film industry there was on its last legs and was in a good shape, and it was difficult for them to find local skilled technicians, so many people had to be flown over from the USA and the UK to take on key roles to manage and supervise the production. While shooting, the currency began to fluctuate on a daily basis and the producers struggled to manage their budget. The bonding company was getting very concerned, and everyone was suggesting ideas to keep the budget down, which resulted in changes to the script, but unfortunately they went over budget, and they were shut down. Many felt the movie was incomplete. The bonding company took over control, and their goal was to finish the movie with what had been shot, and complete any incomplete visual effects in the cheapest way possible. They cut corners in every department just to get it released. The director and key members of the production were furious with the bonding company's cut, but thankfully the largest independent distributor in the UK wanted to save this movie and allow the director and his team to re-edit it. Thankfully the original cut was never used, but unfortunately what the audiences got in the form of the theatrical version was still not good enough. With the new cast members, Michael Ironside plays General Katana. Michael is always great at playing villains, especially psychotic ones, but his character seems to be more of an annoyance than any real threat to MacLeod. He actually seems a lot weaker physically and spends the majority of the time just chuckling to himself. He doesn't really make any lasting impression. He comes across as a stock villain. Sean Connery was paid $3.5 million to return to the series and was on the shoot for just over a week. Apart from James Bond, it's the only other character Sean has returned to play. New love interest Virginia Madsen, who seemed to be popping up in everything during the 80s, is a very talented actress, but all the films she was in were pretty much box office flops or were given negative reviews at the time, such as Electric Dreams, June, Zombie High, and of course Highlander 2. Her output of work was far more successful during the later part of the 90s, and even today. Despite the movie's reputation for being one of the worst sequels ever made, it had sold well on home video, and managed to spawn an official re-edit, and a second edition with new visual effects. It's actually very difficult nowadays to find the original theatrical cut. It's not in print, but you can probably find it on VHS. I believe there's a crappy pan and scan DVD floating around that was released in Europe. If you are a hardcore fan of the theatrical cut, you can get a widescreen version on Laserdisc, only released in Japan though. So please excuse the aspect ratio changing from pan and scan to widescreen throughout this review. Because of the obvious negative feedback to its story, the director and producers went back and reshuffled a few scenes and removed the idea that the Highlanders were from another planet. Instead, they set the backstory in the past, where MacLeod and Ramirez are sent to the future for their punishment, instead of in the theatrical version where they are sent to the planet Earth, which was the main cause of outrage to the fans. They also restored a few scenes to help the movie with its continuity, and also got cast members to return to finish off a scene they never got to complete at the time. Now, in its original theatrical form, the movie opens in the future of 1999, with news reports of the ozone layer fading away, and it will be completely gone in a few months. Millions of people have died due to the extreme sunlight. MacLeod's wife Brenda is dying, and she pleads to him to do something to save the world to resolve the problem of the missing ozone layer. With the abilities he gained at the end of the first movie, where he has the power to read people's minds, he brings together and supervises the best scientists from around the world to create an electromagnetic shield to cover the planet and protect it from the sun's radiation. The team are unaware of the shield's eventual side effects, which results in the planet being put in a state of constant night, high humidity and temperature. By 2024, the shield has been taken over by the Shield Corporation, headed by David Blake, who is only concerned with profits and is holding back information about the possibility of the ozone layer being fully repaired. Former employee and turned terrorist Louise Marcus breaks in with her team to gain the information needed to prove her theory about the ozone layer. Connor, now very frail and old, is in a local opera watching a performance, and it jogs his memory about his forgotten past. This is where the movie literally destroys the mythology of the first film. It cuts to his original homeworld of Zeist. A meeting is being held to discuss the rebellion against the ruling leader, General Katana. The rebels' leader Ramirez chooses a man of great destiny from among them, and the Quickening chooses MacLeod to carry out the mission. He basically fails big time, and he and Ramirez are captured and tried for their crimes by Zeist's priests, who sentence them to be exiled and reborn on Earth in pursuit of the prize. Winning the prize gives the victor the choice to grow old and die on Earth, or to return to Zeist. I don't know why anyone would want to return to Zeist, it looks like a shithole. Cutting back to 2024, Louise Marcus gains the intel needed and escapes the Shield complex. Louise heads to the city to find MacLeod, so she can help gain support to bring the Shield down. Meanwhile, on Zeist they are monitoring MacLeod. Katana decides that MacLeod cannot be allowed to return, and sends his immortal henchmen to kill them, which is a prime example of the film's silly script. If he left MacLeod to die, it would have resolved everything, but being an incredibly stupid villain, he just wants MacLeod to be killed. Louise manages to reach MacLeod first and asks for his help. To her disappointment, she finds the passionate man she once admired has grown into a tired old man. Before they can finish their conversation, Katana's henchmen arrive on Earth and attack. MacLeod manages to decapitate both of them, absorbing their energy during the quickening, and regains his youthful appearance. In the process, MacLeod summons Ramirez back to life. In Glencoe, Scotland, location of his death in the first Highlander film, Ramirez is revived. He finds himself on a theatrical stage doing a performance of William Shakespeare's Hamlet, and on his way out he grabs a sword that resembles the one from The Princess Bride. Louise is shocked to see MacLeod has gotten younger, and he explains he is immortal. Then they suddenly have sex in the street, which comes out of nowhere. Louise tries to understand the process of his immortality, and our dialogue for this scene is really lazy, and you can tell the writers have totally lost interest in the changes made to this new Highlander mythology. On the planet Zeist, General Katana, being the idiot he is, has to correct the mistakes he made earlier, and goes to kill MacLeod himself, and is transported to Earth and crash lands on a subway train. He decides to take control of the train and amps up the speed to a ridiculously high number, and pretty much kills everyone on the train and smashes on to the high ground. He tracks down MacLeod and confronts him, but won't attack as they are on holy ground. MacLeod expresses his frustration with Katana, making him immortal again, sending him back to square one. In Scotland, Ramirez has to get to New York. One of his earrings is apparently valuable enough to pay for a new suit he requires from the finest and oldest tailor shop in Scotland, and for an airplane ticket without actually requiring a passport. Ramirez finds MacLeod and they team up to bring the shield down to save the Earth. The visual effects for the film were handled by Stargate Studios, who are now one of the most impressive FX studios in the industry. You can easily find their show reel online just to see how good they are. The visual effects in the original cut were unfortunately very inconsistent. The FX team were not able to finish their work as the bonding company took over and gave it to another studio to finish off to save money. You have wobbly opticals and miniatures, but also in its favour some very detailed matte paintings to expand the city. They also incorporated a new technique of laser animation, which essentially is painting with light, that was only used on Highlander 2 for the quickening and shield effects. The effects team, headed by Sam Nicholson, had shot 50,000 feet of elements, with different examples of the shield to be used, but only about 7 feet were actually incorporated and repeated throughout the film, and the bonding company who had taken over the production went with the red design for the shield, which doesn't work at all with the film's photographic design. The director of photography used a lot of cold blues to simulate the night sky, so you have blue lighting beaming through the windows. Thankfully, with the special edition version, they restored the original design for the shield and improved many of the optical effects and matte paintings. They did a fantastic job restoring the visual effects, certainly better than the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. It's funny how a film regarded as one of the worst sequels ever made gets such a good treatment later in life. All we need now is Harrison Ellenshaw to return to Superman 4 and restore that. With Michael Kamen not returning to score the sequel, probably down to his busy schedule, he was working on 6 films in 1991. In stepped Stuart Copeland, who was the drummer from the band The Police. If you check his credits of work, he has mainly provided soundtracks to video games, such as the Spyro series and Alone in the Dark, but also provided his talents on the 80s classic Wall Street. Stewart uses big brass and a large choir to complement his overall score. Stewart is a fascinating person to listen to when it comes to interviews. He explains in the documentary for the film how he originally composed his score.
The score was composed on a Fairlight computer, which is a totally redundant dinosaur by now. And it basically is a computer which has 2 sides to it. One side is that it has samples of all these different sounds. A flute, it has a sample of every note of a flute and every note of a piano, and all these samples of things that you can create facsimiles. You can create a fake flute passage. And the other thing the computer does is that as you play music into it and you write it, you record the notes, you record your bass line, and it turns what you played into a page of music, so you can give that to a bass player. People say, what would Mozart have written if he had had all this technology? And the answer is probably the same thing, but he probably would have gotten there a little quicker. This computer would generate a facsimile of the sound so that I could have my big brass fanfare and kind of have an idea of how that's going to play against the picture, so that when I take it and put it in front of a real orchestra, I've already heard what it's going to sound like. So it takes a lot of the mystery and worry and anxiety out of the scoring date.
The score certainly does its job and provides an epic sound, but isn't as memorable as Michael Kamen's, who had the advantage of incorporating the amazing music by Queen. The film does have new pop and rock music to run alongside the new score. Most of it is pretty forgettable in my opinion. It didn't stand out and grab my attention or give me an emotional response, like Queen's Who Wants to Live Forever. The end title track One Dream is the standout song out of all of the ones featured on the soundtrack. The soundtrack itself has been out of print for years, and it did arrive on CD when the film came out, but if you want to own it, it will cost you a lot on eBay. It definitely needs a remaster and given a full release. Stuart Copeland did compose far more music than the movie's actual running time, so there is a lot of material that hasn't been heard. During the film they reuse parts of the score from the first movie, especially for the emotional scenes and when Louise enters the room of displayed items from MacLeod's past. These moments really make you feel like you're watching a Highlander movie. There is a scene where Connor and Louise are sitting together on a couch, and the musical editor or whoever looped the Michael Kamen score in the background has done a very bad job of looping the music. There is a very clumsy audible edit as he attempts to extend the score. Highlander 2 is not a good film by any means, and you will struggle to find anyone who will discuss it in a positive light. The theatrical cut, as I mentioned earlier, is very difficult to get hold of, and the one currently in print is the recent special edition, which corrects a number of problems, but to be honest it still doesn't really improve it. It makes the movie more digestible and easier to follow, but the damage is already done. Even having MacLeod's flashback being set in the past on Earth instead of another planet, it still doesn't make much sense. You have this advanced race in the past but with future tech like guns and being able to send people into the future. In the original cut and in the new cut, the science fiction element is very lazily written and extremely basic. If you plan on changing a movie's backstory for a sequel, then you really have to provide a strong argument and explanation to warrant the changes in hoping the audiences will respect them, but there is none of that. Bringing Sean Connery's character back was totally pointless, and he had no reason to be there. It does nothing to benefit the story, but instead it just does further damage to the rules the first movie set up. They bring Sean back for a small number of scenes and then just kill him off in what is probably the most cliched trap ever shown on film. It's like it's from a cartoon, and he apparently has the power to propel the spinning fan in time for MacLeod and Louise to escape. So many things in this film just don't add up. With its visual design and ideas, it's like the producers have watched Dune, Blade Runner and even Robocop and said, hey, we want something like this. It's pinched established ideas and shoved them into one movie. The battle sequence on Zeist is a scene from Dune. New York is a mix of Blade Runner and the Tim Burton Batman film. The movie also has these weird comical adverts that seem to have been inspired by Robocop. With the majority of Highlander 2 being set at night time, it makes the movie a very gloomy and depressing experience. Because of the poor narrative and the extreme changes made to MacLeod's history, you don't care about what you're seeing on screen. There is no emotional investment, the battle sequences are pretty dull, it falls under the problem of just stuff happening. The one scene I found to be very interesting and a great idea is when they break into the S.H.I.E.L.D. compound and get shot to bits and trick the security guards into believing they are dead. A great way to use your immortality to your advantage. They wake up in the morgue and take the guards out and end up surprising the doctor on duty.
And just look at my splendid waistcoat.
Oh! Wait a minute. You guys are dead. Well, Larry!
What can you take away from this film and say what works or feels needs praise? Well, certainly the photography and visual design is very good, despite it borrowing ideas from other films. Its set design is what people remember fondly about it. The movie exhibits Russell Mulcahy's great directorial eye, with great sweeping camera shots and setups. With sequels having to be bigger and better, they shot it in cinema scope. I kinda wish they stuck with the Academy 1:85 ratio which the first movie was shot in. and it is definitely a format Russell tends to favour with his movies. With a change in lenses, it kind of missed the distinctive look the first one had, and that depth of field. The action set piece with the flying hoverboards is shot and executed extremely well, handled by the Wire team from the Superman films. At the time, it's nothing people had seen before, and something you probably won't see again today in live action form. Christopher Lambert did a lot of his own stunts, and Russell manages to create an interesting and new action sequence, so you have to give them credit for that. Supposedly in parts of Europe, the theatrical prints had the alternative ending attached. I'm not sure if this is true because I don't remember seeing it as a kid when Highlander 2 was on TV. The new ending had MacLeod taking Louise back to his home world of Zeist, instead of him just destroying the shield and with Ramirez giving his final words to end the film. The sort of fairy tale ending is included on the DVD and Blu-ray as a deleted scene, and you can see why it wasn't used in all the cuts, with none of the sequels to the first movie being rated highly and all performing badly in their theatrical runs, and with them all ignoring the events in Highlander 2, the sequels still make a healthy profit on home video and DVD, so people are still buying them despite them being really bad, especially Highlander the Source, which apparently makes Highlander 2 look like Citizen Kane. If Highlander 2 didn't have the production problems with the bonding company taking over and interfering with the creative direction of the story and Russell Mulcahy, then I think it would have had less negative feedback at the time. But because they had gone out to shoot the sequel with the idea of the planet Zeist in mind, which is the biggest fault of this movie, it still would have angered fans and screwed up the mythology of the Highlander history. They could have gone with doing a prequel at the time, exploring the life of MacLeod, but then you have the problem of knowing his character is going to be okay if he encounters any serious threat, because it's a prequel. All the fans of the series probably own Highlander 2 even though they claim they hate it. It's a sequel that's interesting to watch, especially with friends to discuss how not to do a sequel. It can be a fun experience just to laugh at the absurd and extreme changes made to throw in the new, feeble and weak ideas of the planet Zeist, or if you own a special edition version, the events of MacLeod's past. The DVD and Blu-ray certainly have interesting content that explore the problems of the production, and the producers certainly admit they screwed up. Can it be regarded as a movie so bad it's good? Probably not. I certainly wouldn't recommend it, to be honest, but if you love watching bad movies, then you'll probably get some enjoyment or laughs out of it. But with the added visual effects, it's the old saying, you can't polish a turd, but at least for Highlander 2, they've made this turd a bit more presentable.
So, what do you want me to do?
You built the shield. Maybe you can figure out what's going on up there.
What are you saying?
Something is being kept very, very quiet.
So you started Cobalt. Got your face on national TV.
Well, of course. Somebody had to get people's attention. Start asking questions. Find out the truth.
Someone like you?
No. Damn it. Someone like you.
It's so good to see you again, MacLeod.
The remains of your mortal wife. So frail.
So very dead.
MacLeod. Your time is now!
There can be only one.
Most people have a full measure of life, and most people just watch it slowly drip away. But if you can summon it all up at one time, in one place, you can accomplish something glorious.